field with nice rows of corn. But look at this terrain. Look how it dips and rises all in this direction here. That's something that you don't get when you read a book or watch a documentary. When you physically come to the battlefields, this is what you can see is the terrain, especially in the winter when there's less foliage. That's one thing that's sticking out to me here. Now, Isaac Rodman himself saw this gap forming between the 16th Connecticut and the 8th Connecticut, who was advancing in this general direction. He personally rode over to this area, rode up to Colonel Francis Beach, and had some colorful language exchange with the colonel and the division commander. And he was simply stating, like, hey, you need to get your men moving in this direction. We have a gap being created in the lines, and as that conversation was taking place, Rodman noticed some movement on the left flank here. And that movement was AP Hill's Light Division taking the field fresh off their victory at Harper's Ferry, which is 17 miles away. Now, upon that victory, those Confederate forces hustled to this location because Lee was in dire need of reinforcements. He only had a couple thousand Confederate forces defending this portion of the battlefield, and the entire 9th Corps, 9,000 strong, was sweeping across this field here. So, just in the nick of time, 2,000 men of AP Hill's Light Division were taking the field. And in this location, you had Maxcy Gregg's South Carolinians, comprising of the 1st, 12th, 13th, and 14th South Carolina. And in this direction, you had James Archer's mixed brigade advancing towards us on the camera here. And you also had a brigade of North Carolinians advancing across the field, attempting to cut off the 8th Connecticut and the 9th New York in this direction here. So now the 16th Connecticut was being hit on their flank, and we already touched on how they have little to no training. So imagine being a soldier in this regiment, having an experienced force on your flank pouring hot lead into your ranks, and you have no idea how to perform maneuvers, much less these maneuvers being performed under fire here. All right, so obviously there's no corn here, but let's use our imaginations a little bit, all right? We're hunkering down. We were ordered to lay down. So hopefully some of that Confederate artillery coming from this area wouldn't strike us. We're hunkered down in the corn. The 8th Connecticut on the right flank, they've already advanced. They were told to advance. Somehow we didn't get that order. Now, all of a sudden, we're told to come to our feet, and there's a Confederate force of experienced South Carolinians on our flank, and they began pouring devastating volleys into our ranks. We're already scared. I have no idea how to fire my musket. I fired it once yesterday. This is the situation that these men were in. And I'm already a little out of breath just by hiking around with a backpack. So imagine your adrenaline going, and you have no training, and you find yourself in the bloodiest single day in American military history. Man. Now, despite the 16th inexperience, they were able to start returning some fire from this location. And they actually inflicted heavy casualties on the 1st and 12th South Carolina, who reformed and charged this location a handful of times. And eventually, between the fire to their front and the fire to their flank, the 16th Connecticut and the 4th Rhode Island began to falter here, and they began to pull back in this general location. Now, you see that monument in the distance there. That is a monument to a handful of Ohio regiments who tried to stem the tide here to no avail. But we are in the location where the 16th Connecticut experienced their baptism of fire here. And I don't know if you can blame them for the ensuing fight or lack thereof that this turned into, but I feel like, given the circumstances, they did their best, and they were
Well, we're going to keep you in suspense. What happened at Antietam, so it's how we learn to draw people in. Good evening. Welcome to the November meeting of the Scottsdale Civil War Roundtable. I'm Mark Stolen, president of the organization. We always like to start off with, I think we have some new members here. If you're a new member, could you raise your hand? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. just as a reminder, we finished the year last year with about 350 members. We're hoping to maintain that membership through this season. And we also have a number of guests here. If you're a guest, could you raise your hand? Again, thank you very much. We have quite a few. We hope you find it interesting and return to see more of our programs. A couple of notes on scheduling. Usually our history discussion group, which usually occurs the week after our meeting with our speakers. Because of Thanksgiving, our history discussion group meeting will occur this week on Thursday, November 20th. And as always, it'll be at the Wildflower Cafe at the intersection of Scottsdale and Indian Bend Road, where we have a private room. And it's a very free-flowing discussion, member facilitated, and will be on the nice, calm, quiet topic of the constitutionality of secession, which will be discussed on Thursday. It's very enjoyable, a lot of fun. Also, our December meeting, because of the holidays, will be on the second Tuesday of the month, not on the third, on December 9th. And John Taylor, our program chair, will give you some more information on that. I think most of you know that we are doing a tour of the Picacho Pass battle in a Pioneer Cemetery in late January. We still have, as of right now, 8 seats left. If you're interested in joining us for that full day tour, you can find the information and sign up on our website. Another thing that we're doing this year that we started for the first time last year is to participate in National History Day. And that's run by the Arizona Historical Society. It's a national event where students from 5th through 12th grade develop presentations on historical themes. They go through a judging process, and then the winners from those states go to a national. What we did last year is we had about a dozen judges who were roundtable members participate. So we were actually about 15% all the judges in the state. The semifinals in the state occur in February and March. And we're going to send out more information on that, but a number of us have already signed up to participate as judges again. And it's a fun experience. It's a one-day commitment, or actually part of one day. So we hope a number of you will join us with that. I also wanted to mention, so we have a couple of Civil War encampments and reenactments coming up. There's one at Picacho Peak State Park this Saturday and Sunday, all day. So you can go down there and see. It's not a reenactment; that's an encampment where they will explain, what it's like to be a Civil War soldier and everything they got with them. There will be a reenactment at the Pioneers Living History Museum up on I-17 the weekend of, I believe it's the 13th and 14th. John Fritz, if you're here, have I got the dates right?
Yes, those are the correct dates.
Okay. Mike. And so, again, we'll have information for all of these events in our monthly newsletter. Finally, I will also just add that we're always looking for any backup technical help to help us with on our YouTube setup and on our cameras. If you are interested or know anybody who is interested, please let us know. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Taylor, our program chair.
Good evening, everybody. Quick reminders. I know we just keep doing announcements. I just want to put this up to remind everybody December 9th is our next meeting. So it's second Tuesday, not third Tuesday. And then obviously the rest of the program comes from the Great Shot. Okay, so tonight we welcome John Banks, who I hope all of you know by now because I keep trying to evangelize his podcast. John is one of the co-broadcasters of the Antietam and Beyond podcast, which you can find on the Apple Store or the Google Store I tried to put some pictures up to remind any of you that don't do podcasts what the app looks like. Go into the app, search Antietam and Beyond, and John and Tom McMillan's podcast will come up. And if you go on there, you'll see the last episode they recorded was with our own George Rabel. So it's a great episode. You should subscribe, and hit the bell and do all that other stuff, because then, helps monetize the channel. John also has a prolific Facebook and blog page. So if you don't do Facebook, you can find him just by sort of Googling John Banks Civil War, and it'll take you to his website. There's an incredible amount of content if you're looking for more Civil War content. I had to put this in here too. John is probably the chief historian of the 16th Connecticut. And so that's why I had the preview video and threw the monument up there, 40-acre cornfield, for those of you that are familiar with it. And of course, I had to introduce this important subject. So even though John is from Pittsburgh, John has spent his career as a sports journalist in addition to being a Civil War author and Civil War journalist. And John had his education at West Virginia, which he talks about a lot if you listen to his podcast. So I was rather pleased to see that when his Mountaineers came to town, they got a little bit of the Sun Devil flavor. So I wanted to put that up there and remind everybody. All right, with that, I know I didn't cover his whole bio, but it would take me all night. So I'm just going to let John get up here and start telling you about his Civil War journey of a lifetime.
Oh, boy.
John, thank you. West Virginia University was the best 14 years of my life. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, yeah, there's a little place. Okay. Oh, there we go. Very good. Yeah. Excellent.
If you don't need it, no,
All right. Good. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm blown away by all the Waymos in Scottsdale. I turned to my left and I saw a driverless car. I couldn't figure it out. I was going, what the heck is going on here? And I will never, ever in the history of ever take a driverless car. So anyway, all right. This is my book, and if you have it in your heart to purchase a copy, we still have 5 left, and it's essential that I sell all the books out because we have 2 daughters who are engaged to be married, and we had a family conference call the other night. And I said, yeah, I'm going to Scottsdale. I'm hopeful to sell a bunch of books. And if Dad doesn't sell out all the books, your wedding receptions could be at Panera. So if you have it in your heart to buy a book, that would be great. And the reviews have been, not bad. And then there's John Taylor's review. Okay. Dull and boring. No, but it was, I had a tremendous time over the course of roughly 18 months going on the road, visiting Civil War battlefields, historic sites, out of the way places. And my lovely wife, Carol, who's in the audience, I'm not going to ask her to stand and embarrass her, always was thrilled when I left town most of the time. So. All right, here's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to take you on a few of my adventures. And, back when I grew up in suburban Pittsburgh a long time ago, we had a neighbor who used to invite our family over to view his vacation photos. And I always called him the annoying neighbor. So tonight, I'm going to be your annoying neighbor for part of the time. I'm also going to, explain to you my interest in the Civil War, what led me to do this book, and kind of highlight some of the trips that I thought were most memorable. And then at the end, I'm going to give you some very, very valuable advice. And hopefully you'll stick around to the end and we'll make this a very enjoyable presentation. So, all right. This is the person who finances all the trips and gives the go-ahead. And she's in the middle there. Okay. All right. And I've been married for 33 years, so luckily I can get away with saying that joke. And it's kind of funny because Carol, every time she shows this picture to people we know, she goes, "My husband is here." And it's kind of, yeah, it's kind of crazy. All right. So I grew up in suburban Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and when you grow up in Pennsylvania, going to Gettysburg is it's a rite of passage. So, I went there when I was 12 or 13. I have two siblings, a younger sister and a younger brother. And when we went there, there was a place on Baltimore Pike that sold Civil War knickknacks, including a real sleeve of Civil War bullets. And my dad purchased it for like $3 or $4, and he gave them to us. My brother and sister had zero interest in the bullets, but those bullets served as my rocket fuel for my interest in the Civil War. How many of you have been to Gettysburg, by the way? Okay. How many of you are native Arizonans? There's a sliver. Okay, great. Because I wondered, I said, when I got invited out here, I was thinking, oh my gosh, there's a roundtable in Scottsdale, Arizona. How many of these folks actually get back east or to the Western Theater to see battlefields and historic sites? So I'm curious, how many of you all take those type of trips? All right, you guys are my people. We got some hardcore people here. So anyway, my interest in the Civil War, dated to that trip when we went to Gettysburg when I was 12 or 13. And actually, my interest may have been kind of predestined. I went to Julia Ward Howe Elementary School in suburban Pittsburgh, in Mount Lebanon. And of course, Julia Ward Howe, Battle Hymn of the Republic, wrote that song. So anyway, my initial interest in the Civil War, what also served as rocket fuel for my interest, was the Antietam battlefield. And how many of you have been to Antietam? Oh, John, this is a great group. Oh my gosh, this is great. I used to be a board member of the Save Historic Antietam Foundation, and going to Antietam over the years, and I've been there dozens upon dozens of times, really lit another fire underneath me beyond, my Gettysburg experience. So, I wanted to kind of build off that interest. And, I got to the point where on every weekend, we live in Nashville, almost every weekend I will take a Civil War excursion. And we just don't go to, Stones River or Shiloh. My battlefield tramping pal Jack and I will go to Snow Hill and Vaught's Hill and these very obscure places. And the name, the voice of David McCullough, who is a Pittsburgh native. How many remember the documentary by Ken Burns? He was the voice of the documentary. And I keep hearing his voice in my head. Over all these years, the Civil War was fought in 10,000 places from X to X. So I've kind of lived that experience. And, the Antietam experience, again, is the one that really fired me up for doing what I do. And, every time I'd go to Antietam, I would find these amazing characters to visit with, including Earl Roulette and his wife, Annabelle. And Earl Roulette is the great grandson of or great-grandson of William Roulette. And if you know anything about the Antietam battlefield, the Roulette Farm is adjacent to the Sunken Road and Bloody Lane. Much of the fighting on the northern end of the field took place on William Roulette's farm. And I used to go over to Earl Roulette's house, and Earl was a farmer. He had lived in Sharpsburg, Maryland, where Antietam battlefield is located. He had farmed that a property there all his life, basically. And I would go over to Earl and Annabelle's house, and being a farmer, he kept the house to like 85 degrees every day. And it could be summer, it could be winter, it could be spring. That house was hot. And I'd go over and visit with him, and it was such a fascinating experience. He would bring out this daguerreotype of Nancy Camel, who was a freed slave who worked for William Roulette. He would also pull out of an envelope this small ring that, according to Earl's family lore, was pulled off the finger of a fallen soldier at Antietam. And then he would take me out back. And here's where things got really interesting with Earl. He would take me out back, and he would show me this ammunition crate that was pulled off the battlefield by his ancestors, and it was handed down through his family. And Earl had a high-pitched voice. And I'd go back there, and I'd be looking at these artillery shells in the ammunition crate, and I'd go, Earl, have any of these shells been deactivated? And he would go, and I'm going to try to do his voice here for you. Oh, no. The next time you see me, the buzzards may be circling around my head here. And it was quite the interesting experience to see this stuff. So I'd go to Antietam, and I'd be meeting these crazy characters, including Lester Sonny Mason. And along the Hagerstown Pike, he had this nondescript gift shop / quasi museum that focused on Antietam, including this diorama that he forked over $50,000 for. Had it built, had an electrician build it, all the whiz-bang stuff you could imagine. And it was those type of characters that, like Earl and like Lester Sonny Mason, that really got me fired up for going on the road and doing a book and meeting these kind of people, the local people, and have them tell their stories about their experiences living on these historic battlefields or houses or whatever. And many of you have been to Gettysburg and Antietam. I wanted to go beyond that. Now, in the title of the book, the subhead, obviously it mentions Gettysburg and Antietam, want to suck some people in so they might purchase the book. But I didn't just go to Gettysburg and Antietam. Went to Marshall, North Carolina, Shepherdstown, West Virginia, Hinds County, Mississippi. So, and all points in between. And one of the lessons that I took from writing this book, and maybe it'll resonate with you, is that it's not just your destination where you're going to, it's the journey getting there and the people that you meet along the way. And that's essentially what this book is about. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you some snapshots of some of the people who I've met along the way. And then we're going to go a little bit deeper into some of my favorite stories. The gentleman you see here is Damon Ratcliffe. He is the descendant of an escaped slave who earned the Medal of Honor at the Battle of Newmarket Heights. How many of you have heard of the Battle of Newmarket Heights? Not Newmarket, Newmarket Heights. Newmarket, the Battle of Newmarket was fought in the Shenandoah Valley. The The Battle of Newmarket Heights was fought in late September 1864. Newmarket Heights is roughly 8 miles southeast of Richmond. And at the Battle of Newmarket Heights, 14 U.S. colored troop soldiers earned a Medal of Honor. Now, how many of you have heard that story? One person. And Damon is quite proud of his ancestor who fought in a USCT regiment at the Battle of Newmarket Heights. If fate were turned a little bit differently, it's quite possible that USCT troops could have been marching into Richmond in late September 1864. Damon is here at Fort Harrison, where his ancestor eventually ended up after the battle. All right. I am a little bit odd, and I like odd stories. And the gentleman you see here is Jason Watley. He is a lawyer who lives in Columbia, Tennessee. And his house, which you see behind him, was the scene of an epic Confederate wedding in 1863. Frank Armstrong, who started the war as a Union officer, eventually switched to the Confederate Army. He was married here in 1863, and among the attendees was Nathan Bedford Forrest, and perhaps the greatest womanizer of the Civil War, Earl Van Dorn. And who you, by the way, this is Finn. This is Jason's dog. And Finn has a peculiar habit of almost every time Jason has guests over at this house where that wedding took place, Finn will go out and kill a groundhog and plop the groundhog at the feet of house guests. I found that very interesting. The day that we were at Jason's house, it was about 9:30 in the morning, and he's giving us a tour of the house. And he goes, "Would you like a bourbon?" I go, "Well, not this early, Jason," but it was an interesting experience. All right. This is my friend Tim Talbot. He's on the Newmarket Heights battlefield right here, deep in the woods. The day that I was there was like hell with the lid off. It was like 106 degrees. We traipsed through the woods. It was an amazing experience to visit this unheralded battlefield, Newmarket Heights battlefield, and go into the woods and see the Texas Brigade earthworks, which during the war were probably roughly this high. Now they're a little smaller, but where I get my kicks and where I think our hardcore group here gets your kicks is walking in the footsteps of those who were with us during the Civil War. And being able to see those earthworks deep in the woods was quite a profound experience. And all right. How many have heard of the Battle of Trevilian Station? All right. The Battle of Trevilian Station, George Armstrong Custer led cavalry there at the Battle of Trevilian Station. The day that I went there, I met this couple, and this is Luis and Charles Krebs. And the day that I got there, it was a hot day, probably 103 degrees. And I pull up, and they were taking a bed and putting it into the replica tavern that stood there during the war. And they were just a fascinating couple. Mr. Krebs is a descendant of Confederate soldiers. And how many remember the Maytag Repairman commercial from the 1970s and 1980s? Well, this couple is a docent at the building that served as Custer's headquarters during the Battle of Trevilian Station, and they rarely get visitors. And the day that I was there, I walked in, and they kept me around for a couple hours. It was two of the most enjoyable hours that I've ever spent. They took me all over the property. And later, as I did some digging into the Battle of Trevilian Station, a good hook for me is that Custer had his wagon train captured by the Confederates there. Not only, and in that wagon train, he had his underwear. The Confederates not only took all of the provisions in that wagon, they took along with him Custer's underwear, and they also captured his love letters to his wife, Libby, and they were fairly scandalous for the time. Some of them ended up in the Richmond newspapers. All right, I'm going to keep posing questions to you. If you have any questions for me during this presentation, please raise your hand. I'm happy to answer that. How many have heard of the Sultana sinking? All right, April 1865, the war is effectively over. The Sultana is steamboat is going north on the Mississippi. It's near Memphis, Tennessee. Deep in the night, the ship explodes. It was an accident. And among those killed on the boat, roughly 1,300 people died, including a few civilians. Among the soldiers were many of the men who had recently been paroled and released from Andersonville. It's an amazing tragedy. And I went, this is Jerry Potter, who is a lawyer who lives near Memphis, Tennessee. And he has done some deep research into the sinking of the Sultana. And late in the 19th century, the Mississippi River changed course, and the Sultana is now underneath a soybean field in Arkansas. And Jerry has done quite a bit of research on the Sultana. If you've been to Gettysburg and have not visited Ron Palm's Museum of Civil War soldier photography, it's on Baltimore Street. Do yourself a favor and visit that place. I tell the story about Ron in the book too. All right. Before we get into some of my favorite stories, we'll give you a few more snapshots here. I was thrilled to see that video, John. Thank you, of the 40-acre cornfield, and I feel like a kind of a quasi historian of that regiment, the 16th Connecticut, and I met Lori Buckler Mack online. Sorry, Carol. Online, and she is the descendant of a 16th Connecticut soldier named William Horton. And I tell Lori's story in the book. We walked the ground that the 16th Connecticut walked at Antietam from Snavely's Ford up into the 40-acre cornfield. And this was a very profound experience for Lori to walk in the footsteps of her ancestor who fought in Antietam on September 17th, 1862, and died there. And she has that image of her ancestor, William Horton, who died roughly in this area at the Antietam battlefield. All right. I'm a little quirky. And another story that I tell in the book is a woman named Laura Van Alstine Rowland, who is a huge Abraham Lincoln fan. And once her intern at a hospital got wind of that, Laura worked at a hospital. She ended up making taking an Oreo cookie and carving into the Oreo cookie icing the profile of Abraham Lincoln. Okay, and I don't know what you guys think, but that looks pretty good, right? Looks pretty good. So I convinced Laura to take the Abraham Lincoln cookie and go with us to trace the route that Lincoln did when he visited the Antietam battlefield in early October 1862. So Laura and I were at Harper's Ferry, where Lincoln reviewed the troops of McClellan in early October 1862. We went to the Grove Farm, where the famous image of Lincoln with McClellan was taken by Alexander Gardner in early October, and it was quite the experience. All right, here are some of my unforgettable stories, which you can read in the book. Charleston, South Carolina. How many of you have been to Charleston? How many of you have visited Fort Sumter? How about Fort Moultrie? How about Castle Pinckney in the middle of the harbor? Wow, there's truly some hardcore people here. Well, Castle Pinckney is a small fort, roughly 1.5 miles out into Charleston Harbor. And it was the first U.S. federal installation to fall into Confederate hands after the secession of South Carolina during the war. And it's owned today by the Sons of Confederate Veterans. They bought it from the state of South Carolina, and I'm not kidding, for roughly, I think it was $20 in Confederate money. And they maintain the place. Getting out there is not easy. We happened to go out there on a flat bottom bass boat, me and an Englishman named Matt, and a gentleman, an SCV member who I called Captain Doug. And here's the deal about the day that we went out there. It was stormy. It was about to storm. My wife was heading out to Fort Sumter at the time. She was on one of those tour boats. It was not quite sideways rain, but it was a little bit dicey. So I'm out on Chutes Folly Island, where Castle Pinckney's located. And I got a text from my wife who said, "Don't think I'm going to make it." I'm paraphrasing. "Don't think I'm going to make it. Sideways rain. We've had a good 30-year run for our marriage. That's great." I ended up getting back to shore eventually. But the point of me going out to Castle Pinckney was to see where some of the photos were taken by a Southern photographer of Union prisoners of war who were kept here, Union prisoners of war from the First Battle of Bull Run. So the experience out on Chutes Folly Island is quite surreal. It's almost like the Twilight Zone. And the reason for that is the island is not inhabited. This little spit of land is not inhabited by human beings. It's inhabited almost solely by pelicans. And pelicans produce a lot of pelican poo. And on the day that we were on the island, this little slip of land, we limbo danced into the fort. And my friend Matt encouraged me before going out there, put some Vicks vapor rub underneath your nose. And boy, did I really need it that day. It was pretty smelly. So we go out into the fort. We see some pelicans. You see that beautiful bridge in Charleston over in the distance. And as we're walking around, that day, there was just a bunch of vegetation there. It wasn't barren. None of this stuff was cut. And as we're walking around the fort, Matt goes, there's a cistern out here somewhere. I'm not quite sure where it's at. And then a second later, I hear, ah! He falls into this, not all the way. He goes into this deep hole. And it was a rather interesting experience to see Matt down there in that gully. And out on Chutes Folly Island, there was this blue tarp covered the ground. And I go, Matt, what's what's that blue tarp? He goes, I can't tell you about that. I go, come on, I'm out, I came all this way from Nashville to visit. And he goes, there's a Parrott gun, a huge cannon underneath that blue tarp that the SCV had unearthed out on Chutes Folly Island. And there may be one or two others on that island. Nobody's going to get those. They weigh thousands of pounds, but it was quite the profound and interesting experience to go out there on Chutes Folly Island. All right. How many have heard of the Battle of Champion Hill? All right. It's in Hinds County, Mississippi. And my trip there was made super interesting by the gentleman who took me around. His name was Sid Champion, and he is the great grandson of the owners of the property, which was the vortex of the Battle of Champion Hill. It was fought May 16, 1863. It was a precursor to the siege of Vicksburg. And the day that I visited there was the anniversary of the battle. And I ended up meeting Sid in this ramshackle cabin. And I'd never met Sid before. And he is one heck of a character. And I sit down on the porch and you can see Psycho Parkway. He just an interesting guy. And the day I was there, again, it was the anniversary of the battle. And my visit came like a couple days after a storm. And when you go on the battlefield with Sid, you have to be prepared for anything. So I get on the back of his little ATV here, and we go winging down the old Jackson Road, which was the wartime road, the road that was there when Grant's troops and the Confederate troops were fighting at the Battle of Champion Hill. And it was crazy because he's zooming down the old Jackson Road, and because of the storm, there's a lot of tree limbs across the Jackson Road. And one thing you have to know about Sid is that he's a believer in personal responsibility. So he's not going to turn around and tell you to duck. You got to duck on your own. And I can't tell you what a harrowing experience it was that day. And I didn't want to make my kids, live without a papa. So I spent my whole time as we're zooming down the Jackson Road, ducking underneath these tree limbs. Here you see Sid, and he took me, it was really cool. He took me to the location where his ancestors had their the plantation house, and they were his ancestors were among the biggest slaveholders in this part of Mississippi. The Union Army used the house as a hospital during and after the battle, and after the battle, the place was a wreck. It ended up being virtually destroyed, and it was not rebuilt. But Sid takes me out on the property, and I have an affinity, as Mrs. B will tell you, for battlefield witness trees. Okay, and Sid goes, "Would you like a hunk of a witness tree from the Battle of Champion Hill?" And he grabs a hunk. He goes, "Man, this has fire ants," and he smacks it across the ATV thingy, knocks all the fire ants out of it, gives it to me, and I'm proud to say that hunk of witness tree has been in my garage ever since. It will never ever enter our house. So there it is, right there. In fact, how about that? So if anybody wants a hunk of witness tree, just let me know. So. All right, and for Sid, this battlefield is deeply meaningful to him. it's almost like a piece of him. And he took me to all the nooks and crannies of the field. And I still can picture this in my mind. We go deep in the woods and you see these depressions in the woods. And I asked Sid, I go, why are you taking me here? And those depressions were the graves of Union soldiers who were exhumed shortly after the war and then reburied in national cemeteries. I believe in this case they're in Corinth, and you can see him standing in one of those depressions here. So then, keep in mind that I'd known this man roughly an hour. He takes me deep into the woods. Okay. It was like the wilderness battlefield, go deep into the woods. And here he is at a branch of Baker Creek. The Battle of Champion Hill is also known as the Battle of Baker Creek. And Sid gets out there, and all of a sudden, he pulls a pistol out of his holster. And I didn't know he was carrying it. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it out of the woods. This is crazy. And I go, Sid, what are you doing? And he goes, I want to find you a daggum bullet. And he looks along this tributary of Baker's Creek into this mosaic of rocks, and he was just staring at it for like 10 minutes. He never found that bullet for me, but the fact that he made that effort was deeply meaningful to me. And then my other experience with Sid is that there's an area on the battlefield called the Hill of Death. And because of a quarry operation post-war, it doesn't look like it did in 1863. But Sid took me out there and we sat on a bench. And it was just this profound, almost surreal experience. It's just Sid and I sitting out there, beautiful scene. We're in this area, this hallowed ground. And he turns to me and he goes, John, I've been all over the place. I've been to Mexico, been to Montana, I've been to Texas, I've been overseas, but there's no place that I would rather be than right here at Champion Hill. I mean, that battlefield is part of his soul. It's really amazing to hear him talk about this place. And then he gave me an anecdote about the Hill of Death. He and his buddies, when he was like 16, would go out and buy cheap beer, and they would take garbage can lids and slide down the Hill of Death after drinking some beer. How many have met Sid Champion? Anybody? Go to Hinds County, Mississippi. Go meet him. All right. Again, I like the out of the way places. The places off the beaten path, and there might not be any place like this. The gentleman you see in the foreground is Michael Meehan. He is standing in front of a place called Bachelor's Rest in Deatonville, Virginia. This is on Robert E. Lee's retreat route. Okay, it's the waning days of the war, and the place that you see behind him is obviously falling apart. It's owned by somebody who doesn't have any interest in saving the place. During the war, Bachelor's Rest was occupied by a bachelor who farmed this property. He had, I believe, roughly a dozen slaves. And the day that I was there was, again, a really surreal experience. It was in March. I get there, the sky is a deep blue sky. Then it turns gray. It was cold. And then it starts snowing. And the reason we wanted to go inside Bachelor's Rest is that, again, in the waning days of the war, they're skirmishing and fighting in this area in Deatonville, Virginia. And this was used as a U.S. Army hospital. So, and again, you can see it's falling apart. There's another view of it. It was truly amazing. This place had not been occupied since the 1970s. So I go walking in with my Michael Meehan and another gentleman. I see a dress hanging in what used to be a closet. I see the warm early winter light hitting this chair. I go in and find a get well card from 1962, a postcard from 1950. And then we start looking upstairs. And on the walls upstairs, some of the U.S. Army, federal troops, Yankee soldiers who were treated at this place had written their names. And the object of, this is Joshua Lindemood. He's a ranger at the nearby Sailors Creek battlefield. But the object of Joshua and Michael, they had the permission of the owner of this property to do this. They wanted to remove the signatures left by Union soldiers on this wall. So what they did was they had this cut out, and with the intention of protecting it and saving it. And I believe it'll soon be on display at the Sailors Creek battlefield in Virginia. All right, nearby, again on Lee's retreat route, I went to Farmville, Virginia. And I keep running across people like Dirk Warner and Sid Champion. Dirk lives on the Cumberland Church battlefield. And that place, the hook for me, what was really interesting about this place, besides meeting Dirk, was the fact that the Battle of Cumberland Church was Robert E. Lee's final victory of the war. So Dirk and I, there's Cumberland Church, which is nearby. There is, Dirk is a gentleman farmer. That is one of his cows called Nibbles. And Nibbles and I kind of hit it off. If I could have taken Nibbles home with me, I would, but I don't think putting a cow in the back of our SUV would really be something that would my family would appreciate. And by the way, Dirk cannot take this cow and cannot take this cow to market. He's pretty tight with the cow. And what was interesting about this battlefield for me is that a soldier in the 148th Pennsylvania, Joseph Law, right here, a bugler in that regiment. He served with his brothers Charles and DC. He was killed on that property on the Cumberland Church battlefield. And picture this: it's the waning days of the war. Okay, Joseph Law is 24 years old. All right, he has a son, a 1-year-old son. He's married, and the war in the Eastern Theater is almost over. Okay, Appomattox Courthouse is going to the surrender is going to take place a few days later. Joseph Law is aboard a horse. He's a bugler. He's making his bugle calls. He goes out into roughly this area right here. He's struck by a Confederate artillery shell, and he's killed. He ends up getting buried, according to Dirk's records that he's researched, in this strip of woods right out here. And Dirk has gotten to know the descendant of Joseph Law. He's become really close with him. And in fact, he's even given Dirk a wartime photo of Joseph, who was killed on the property, that hangs proudly in Dirk's house. And Dirk, it's Dirk's intention to get a ground penetrating radar and see if he could find that body, which he still believes is buried on the Cumberland Church battlefield. That's Dirk, and I did share a bourbon with Dirk, by the way. So, all right. How many have been to Middletown, Maryland? All right. This is the Rudy House in Middletown, Maryland. And it's interesting because this is where Rutherford B. Hayes, an officer in Ohio Regiment, was treated after he was wounded at the Battle of South Mountain on September 14, 1862. He was taken to this house. He ends up recuperating in this room right here. And there's Rutherford and his wife, Lemonade Lucy. And of course, Rutherford becomes president of the United States following the Civil War. There's a wartime image of him. And this place is unmarked in Middletown. I always had a kind of a rough idea of its history. And there's no signage on the house. There's no marker that says what happened here in 1862. So I figured, what the heck? I knocked on the door. And I met some of the two of the loveliest people I've ever met. Lois and Donald Shank. Donald, whom you see here, was born in this house. So was his father. And he's holding an image of Rutherford Hayes here. And that image was given to his ancestors who lived in this house by Rutherford Hayes' son, who came to the house one day well after the war. They wanted to visit. So I kind of had to work up my courage, but I eventually asked Lois Shank if I could go upstairs and visit the bedroom where Rutherford Hayes was treated. And it's interesting because Hayes's wife, Lemonade Lucy, traveled from Ohio to Middletown, Maryland to help nurse her husband. And Rutherford spent a lot of time in that upstairs bedroom, gradually recovering from his South Mountain wound. And he frequently got into a conversation with the Rudy's son. And they ended up striking up quite a friendship. And they used to sit upstairs and watch the U.S. Army soldiers come down the National Road past the house. And it was just an amazing friendship. Charlie was roughly 10 years old. The Rudys became very, very close to Rutherford. But there's tragedy in this story too. Charlie ends up dying of typhus in 1864, which really rocked the Rudy family. All right. Here's one of my favorite people. The gentleman you see here is Richard Clem. Richard is 85 years old. He's very devout. And he's a retired woodworker who lives in Hagerstown, Maryland. He's also a former relic hunter. He and his brother have found 10,000 bullets on battlefields around Western Maryland. And he and I at the Burnside Bridge in Antietam. Richard and I have this kind of Greek philosopher mentee relationship. I have a tendency to swear a lot. He's very devout, so I have to watch my language around Richard. And one of the places that we always go to when I'm in Antietam is the Otto J. Smith Farm. located a little bit off the battlefield at Antietam. And it's not part of the National Military Park, but this was a division hospital for the United States Army in the aftermath of Antietam. And so many tragic stories played out here. And Richard has done some detecting on this property with permission. And again, every time we go to Antietam, we stop at the Smith farm. It's now owned by a Mennonite farmer. And Richard loves telling stories. I call him the Babe Ruth of storytellers. And every time we go out here, he points to this ground right here. And the hospital site was like roughly in this area. And he says, John, there are days when the sun hits that ground and you can see the glint of medicine bottles out in this field. It's really amazing. And to be able to when you hear a story like that, you feel the past is much, much closer than ever. It's really profound. Here's a shot taken by Alexander Gardner in 1862. Right out in that field was that barn. This was again a United States hospital. And one of the stories, Richard has told me this story a million times. He's standing out on the Otto Smith farm property. And one day he was metal detecting the property, relic hunting the property with his brother. And Richard turned to his brother. He said, today's the day. I'm going to find something really important. And this hill that you see right here near that hospital site, Richard, it was cedar trees in 1984. And roughly 5 or 6 minutes into Richard's hunt of the property, he's listening to those beeps in his headphone for his metal detector. And he finds this, an ID tag for a soldier named William Secor, who was in a Vermont regiment. And Civil War soldiers weren't issued ID tags. What they did was they purchased a piece of metal, some of them did, roughly the size of a quarter. They had the sutler inscribe their name on it. And Richard, that's what he found. And to find one of these is truly remarkable. Richard, in his relic hunting experience, has found 3 of these. And I'd like to say that's the equivalent of Babe Ruth hitting 3 grand slams in a game. It's truly remarkable. And what Richard did was he's so passionate about telling these Civil War stories. He has a little bit of a journalist in him and has written for a magazine called Cracker Barrel. He did some deep research into William Secor, ended up tracking down his descendants who were just astounded that he had found this quarter-size ID tag. And William Secor, tragically, was the only soldier in his regiment to be killed at Antietam on September 17, 1862. And Richard is just this remarkable man. One of the other ID tags that he had unearthed, he ended up tracking down, and this is only a couple of years ago. He tracked down the descendant, invited the descendant to his house in Hagerstown. And the descendant of the soldier of the ID tag had an 8-year-old son. And Richard, just this wonderful human being, at the end of the visit, took the ID tag out of the little Riker case and he gave it to that boy. A great example of paying it forward, which is what I'd like to do too in all my endeavors. Okay. If you take one thing away from this talk, again, hopefully it's this. It's not the destination, it's the journey, okay? So when you're going to these places, the historic sites or battlefields, talk to the locals, get to know people. Don't eat at McDonald's. Eat at the local places. Visit with the local people. Listen to their stories. I think it'll open up a giant world for everybody. I think that's so important. And as I tell my kids, my two daughters, both of whom are engaged, by the way, you know, 98.6% of life is schmoozing. The other 10% is bullshit. Okay. So, all right. I am not a right flank, left flank person. But I'm going to offer, so hopefully that's okay with everybody today. But I'm going to offer something that I'm pretty sure Gary Gallagher or Ed Bars never gave you. Restaurant reviews. Okay. How many of you like to eat food? All right, good. Okay. So these are my top 5 right here. The Beechwood, the best steak I've ever had. Way better than Morton's, way better than Chris's Steakhouse, okay? It's a family restaurant in Vicksburg, Mississippi. Sid Champion recommended that place to me. And after my book came out, I took him out to dinner at the Beechwood. Number 2, the Press Room in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. It's in a former newspaper office, which floats my boat as a former newspaper man. Bonnie's at the Redbird in Keysville, Maryland. Country food at its best. Here's a true story. I go there to meet a descendant of a 16th Connecticut soldier. We end up sitting down for breakfast at Bonnie's at the Redbird. I end up, he looks at me and he goes, after he's kind of getting a bead on who I am, you know, former journalist and yada yada. And he goes, John, I used to work for the CIA. Are you good with that? And it's like, oh, yeah, I'm totally good with that. He was a station chief in Europe. And one of my other interests is the JFK assassination. I'm pretty deeply into that. When I was a kid, I bought a Dallas phone book and I called witnesses up. I was like 13 or 14. And I ended up working at the Dallas Morning News for 21 years, 3 blocks from Dealey Plaza. And so I started giving him my spiel on the Kennedy assassination. After that breakfast, I never heard from him again. I'm a little bit worried about that. It was interesting. All right. Number 4, Walker's Diner in Farmville, Virginia. I ate pancakes there in the cold, 32 degrees. I couldn't get inside because it was too crowded. Really great breakfast food. And the Sweet Shop Bakery in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. You can go in there and get 3 giant molasses cookies and a cup of Guatemalan coffee for like $6. So if you're ever in Shepherdstown, which is across the Potomac River from the Antietam battlefield, I highly encourage you to visit that place. And then honorable mention, Tacker's Shake Shack in Marion, Arkansas. Marion is where a new museum on the Sultana is going to be opening fairly soon. It's going to be spectacular. So if you get a chance, Marion, Arkansas is right across the way from Memphis. Highly recommend it. I don't, however, recommend the Sultana burger. Okay. And don't kill the messenger here, but they have a burger called the Sultana burger, and they bill it as top heavy like the real Sultana, which induced a groan. It took 4 of us to take that down. My brother-in-law, my wife, and my sister-in-law. It's a giant hamburger. So anyway, first time you get restaurant reviews at your Civil War talks, perhaps? I don't know. I'm happy to take any of your questions.
All right. Thank you, John. Do we have anybody with questions from the most traveled Civil War journalist in America?
Got one here.
Oh, I'm wandering
Yes.
around.
Oh, sorry.
I'm a guest tonight. I'm just curious how many in the audience have relatives that fought in the Civil War?
Well, that's a good question. How many in the audience have ancestors that fought in the Civil War? It looks like about 70%.
That's good.
Well, thanks for coming tonight, too. Mark's got a question. Any other show of hands, too?
I just, are there a couple examples, how did you find some of these people?
That's a good question. Everybody asks me that.
Yeah, the question is, how did he find all of these random weird people like Sid Champion?
Yeah, Mark, that's a good question. The way I describe it, half the stories in the book were planned and half were serendipity. And the serendipitous half, I think, are the better stories. Like when I met Louise and Ed Krebs at Trevilian Station, that was pure serendipity. And, you know, I was driving down the road from Stanton, Virginia to Richmond, and I saw, you know, you see one of those brown historical markers, you know, those brown markers, such and such historic site. And I saw the one for Trevilian Station. And I said, well, I've never been here. I went off down the, you know, the snaky road past Amelia Courthouse till I get to Trevilian Station. So the serendipity stories, I think, were the ones that I found most interesting. So, yeah.
We got a question back here.
Yeah, I just had a comment. When I was in the National Guard years and years ago, had to go down to Fort Gordon, Georgia, which is in North Georgia. And on a weekend, I went up to Resaca, which is a battlefield in Sherman's March.
Yeah.
Not in the March, but in its Atlanta campaign. And I said, well, I'm going to go on this battlefield because my wife's great-great-grandfather had fought in that particular battle. And it just happened that I ran into a guy that lived on the battlefield. His name was Marion Patty. He's probably dead and gone now, many years. But we had a great time. He was there doing relic hunting on the battlefield, and he found me a bullet, you know, and he says, you got to take this with you. And I gave him a copy of my wife's great-great-grandfather's memoirs, and he took it. He was very active there. And lo and behold, I guess about 6 months later, I got something in the mail. It was the whole battlefield map, all of the maps from the Resaca battlefield. So, you know, you just run into things like that, and it just reminded me of that activity.
That's awesome. And making those connections, that's really meaningful. That's awesome. I love that. I have a witness tree hung from Resaca too, by the way. It's in my SUV. It'll never get inside.
What's a witness tree?
Oh, what's a witness tree? That's a good question. A witness tree is a tree that was on the battlefield when the fighting took place. And some people have an affinity for collecting hunks of witness tree. So I don't have a giant collection. It's like 3 pieces, but I'm weird. So anyway, there you go.
Any other questions for John? All right, we got one more here. Where was the third witness tree from?
The third, Nashville. Yeah, there were. Can I tell a quick story, John?
Yeah.
All right, here's the deal. I was driving through a neighborhood. You know, the Nashville battlefield is largely gone and fully developed. There are pockets like Shies Hill and elsewhere. I was telling Elise about this, one of your board members, and it was after a storm. And one day I go past this house where I knew a witness tree stood. And a lot of the branches and big limbs were down. So I called a friend of mine who lives, this is in the Oak Hill section of Nashville. I said, hey, I saw this tree, you know, it looks like this witness tree. There's a lot of limbs down. And my friend happened to know the owner of the property. And he goes, oh, we meet over there. And the owner of the property was having the parts of the tree cut, big hunks cut off. And my friend brought his metal detector and he's waving the metal detector over the big, huge chunks. And he goes, you keep this one, because there were no dings in his headphones for that one. And I'll keep these. Then like about 2 weeks later, he calls me up. He goes, I'm going to have these witness tree hunks x-rayed. So he took these giant hunks. They were really, he needed a dolly for them. And he took them over to his veterinarian. And he had his vet x-ray the tree hunks. And it took like, an hour and a half. And one hunk, nothing in it, another, there was nothing in it. And the man looked like his dog had just died. He was so set on, having bullets or artillery shell fragments found in these big witness tree hunks. So anyway, there's a lot of people in the Civil War community who are a little off. So anyway, there you go.
All right, everybody, put your hands together for John Banks.
Thank you so much.
Get on those podcast apps, Spotify or Apple Store, and download the Antietam and Beyond podcast.
Thank you very much.
And remember, discussion group is this Thursday, not next Thursday. Show up. Bruce is going to tell us why it was completely constitutional for the South to secede.
Oh, when you came from. Oh, really?
I'm from Allentown. I was born in Allentown.
Backyard brawl. Backyard brawl.
Yeah, so just gotta walk into it.
Yeah. Very nice.